Ethan lived alone on the edge of a quiet colony planet, where forests touched the sky and the stars felt close enough to touch. His small house was old but strong, and behind it, he had a garden he loved more than anything. That garden was his peace, his joy, and his hard work. He grew potatoes, herbs, and beautiful red tomatoes. Those tomatoes were his favorite. Every morning, he would walk out with a cup of hot tea and smile at the rows of shining red fruits waiting to be picked. But one morning, something was wrong. Ethan saw broken vines. Some tomatoes were missing. Others were on the ground, bitten halfway and thrown aside. He frowned. "Must be some animals," he muttered, shaking his head. Still, he cleaned up the mess and went on with his day. The next morning, it happened. Again and again the day after that. Now Ethan was sure this was no accident. Whatever was taking his tomatoes was careful. Only the ripest ones were gone. And the strange part, there were no animal tracks, just small, muddy footprints. Like those of a child, but not human. 3 toes, thin, sharp. That's not a forest animal, Ethan whispered to himself, kneeling to inspect the prints. And it's not a kid either. His hand tightened into a fist. Those tomatoes took weeks to grow. He worked under the sun, through rain, protecting them from bugs and disease. And now some thief, possibly alien, was stealing them like candy. He was angry. Angry and curious. That night, Ethan didn't go to sleep. He waited. He placed a chair near the back window with a clear view of his garden. He turned off all the lights and sat in silence. The clock ticked. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. The wind blew softly through the trees. The moonlight lit the garden like silver. Then, movement. Ethan froze. Something was crawling through the tall grass near the fence. He squinted. It was small, child-size figure, thin, moving quickly but low to the ground. It slipped under the fence without a sound and ran to the tomato rows. The figure crouched and began picking tomatoes, one by one, stuffing them into a small, dirty sack. Ethan quietly opened the door, gripping a flashlight in one hand and a stick in the other. He stepped outside, heart pounding. When he was just a few feet away, he turned on the light. "Hey!" he shouted. The figure froze in the beam of light. Ethan's eyes widened. It was a girl, but not human. Her skin was a pale shade of lavender, and her large, glowing eyes were silver. She had thin arms, long fingers, and war-torn cloth that barely covered her small body. Her hair was messy, tangled with leaves and twigs. She looked starved. Her mouth was red from tomato juice. Her hands trembled. For a moment, they both stared at each other, frozen in fear. Then she screamed a high, sharp sound and turned. To run? Wait. Ethan called out, but she was already gone. Disappearing into the dark woods, he stood there in silence, still holding his flashlight. The sack of stolen tomatoes lay forgotten on the ground. Ethan picked it up. Most of the tomatoes were bruised now, but one had a small bite taken from it. She was eating them raw, he whispered, looking back at the forest. She's not stealing for fun. She's starving. His anger began to fade, replaced by something else. Concern, worry, confusion. Who was she? Where did she come from? Was she alone? What kind of alien child sneaks into human gardens just for food? Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window until sunrise, eyes fixed on the forest the next day. He didn't call security. He didn't set traps. He did something different. He picked the ripest tomatoes from the garden, placed them in a clean wooden bowl, and set it near the edge of the fence. Then he walked back inside, closed the door, and waited again. This time, not with anger, but with a question in his heart. Who is she and why is she so alone? The next morning, Ethan walked to his garden before the sun fully rose. The air was cold, and the grass still held drops of dew. He moved slowly, his eyes searching the fence where he had left the bowl of tomatoes. The bowl was gone. Not just the tomatoes, the whole bowl. Ethan didn't feel angry this time. He felt something else, curiosity. He knelt and looked at the dirt. The same muddy footprints were there again, small and strange 3 toes, light steps. But this time he noticed something new. The footprints didn't vanish into the trees. They continued deeper into the forest, like a quiet trail waiting to be followed. Ethan made a choice. He packed a small backpack with water, a flashlight, and a first aid kit. Then he stepped over the fence and followed the trail into the woods. The trees grew thick around him, and sunlight barely reached the ground. Strange bird sounds echoed above, and insect wings buzzed near his ears. But he didn't stop. The footprints led him past broken logs, under hanging vines, and through quiet streams. As he walked, he began to see small sign twigs tied together, rocks stacked in little towers, and soft leaf beds that looked placed. It wasn't random. Someone had made a path. After about 20 minutes, Ethan found something that made him stop. A piece of the wooden bowl broken. He picked it up. Tomato juice still stained the inside. She's close. He whispered to himself. Just a little further. And he stepped into a small clearing and froze. In the middle of the clearing was a crashed escape pod, half covered in moss and vines. Its hull was burnt and cracked, and the door hung open like a broken jaw. The pod looked old, at least a few years since it had fallen from the sky. Near it, something moved. Ethan ducked behind a tree and watched. The alien girl stepped out from behind the pod, her lavender skin shining in the dim light. She looked around nervously. Her arms held something, a smaller figure. Ethan's eyes widened. It was a child, another alien child, even smaller than her. A boy, maybe 4 or 5 in human years. He was weak, thin, and coughing. She gently set him down on a blanket of leaves and gave him part of a tomato from the stolen bowl. He didn't understand what he was feeling. Pity, guilt, something warm and heavy in his chest. They weren't thieves, they were survivors. Just then, a twig cracked under his foot. The girl snapped, her head around. Her silver eyes met his. She grabbed the boy, pulled him behind her, and crouched like a mother animal ready to fight. Her tiny hands shook, but her face was fierce. Her mouth opened as if to growl, but stopped when Ethan raised his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly, keeping his distance. She didn't move. Her eyes darted from him to the trees, like she was planning to run again. Ethan slowly took off his backpack and placed it on the ground. He unzipped it and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in cloth. Gently, he placed it on a rock and stepped back. "You're hungry," he said. "Take it." The girl didn't blink. She didn't trust him. Why should she? But after a long pause, the boy crawled forward, sniffed the sandwich, and bit it. His face lit up. His tiny fingers tore into the bread like it was the greatest thing in the world. The girl looked at Ethan with wide eyes. She still didn't speak, but she didn't run either. Ethan nodded and slowly turned to leave. He didn't want to scare them more, but before he disappeared into the trees, he stopped. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said, without looking back, with more food. Then he walked away. As he left the forest, his thoughts swirled like storm clouds. This wasn't just a simple case of stolen tomatoes. This was about survival, about children left behind. A crash no one noticed, a family forgotten in the woods. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat by the window again, but not to guard his garden. He sat thinking about the alien, a girl's eyes. They didn't look dangerous anymore. They looked scared. And Very, very alone. Ethan woke early, even before the sun, with one thing on his mind: the children in the forest. His thoughts stayed on the girl's silver eyes and the way her younger brother had clung to her like she was all he had. There had been no adults around, no help, just that old escape pod. And hunger. He packed more food this time, not just sandwiches. He added apples, boiled eggs, soft bread, and a bottle of clean water. He even tossed in a small flashlight and a pair of old blankets. Then he started walking back through the trail of footprints. Each step felt heavier than the last when he reached the clearing. He stopped at the edge and called out gently. "I'm here again," he said softly, not wanting to scare them. "I brought food." No answer. The forest was still. Even the birds were quiet. He stepped forward slowly, holding the food bag high, showing he meant no harm. Then he saw movement. A small face peeked out from inside the escape pod. It was the girl. Her silver eyes locked on his. But this time she didn't hide. She stepped out carefully, holding the little boy's hand. Both looked worn out, like they hadn't slept properly in days. The boy was shaking, his legs weak. The girl stood in front of him like a shield. "I'm not your enemy," Ethan said gently, placing the bag down and backing away. The girl didn't speak, but she stepped closer. She looked inside the bag, then back at him, unsure. After a few seconds, she pulled out the bread and gave the first piece to her brother. He devoured it, crumbs falling on his shirt. Then she did something unexpected. She nodded at Ethan, just a little nod, but it meant everything. Ethan smiled, not moving closer, letting them eat in peace. He sat on a nearby rock and watched the way the children shared the food carefully, making sure the boy got more. She only took what was left. Her hands were thin. Her arms had tiny scars, scratches, maybe burns. The more he looked, the more he realized how much pain they had been through. They were just kids. After they finished eating, Ethan stood to leave again. But as he turned, a soft voice stopped him. "Wait." He froze. It was the girl. She had spoken. Her voice was quiet and cracked, but it was human tongue. "Thank you." Ethan turned slowly, eyes wide. She was looking down, her hands gripping the food bag like a treasure. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl pointed to herself. "Luma?" He nodded. "That's a beautiful name." She didn't smile, but her grip on the bag softened. Then she surprised him again. She pointed at the boy. "Rena, my brother." Ethan gave a soft wave to the boy. "Hello, Rena." The boy blinked at him, then quickly hid behind Luma. That's when Ethan understood something deep. These kids weren't just alone. They were afraid of humans. Probably all humans. He sat back down. "How long have you been here?" Luma didn't answer. She looked toward the sky, then down at the pod. "A long time," he guessed. She nodded. Ethan took a deep breath. "Was your mother in the ship?" Luma didn't speak, but her eyes filled with tears. She looked at Rena, then turned away. That was his answer. Ethan didn't ask more. He just sat quietly with them as the sun rose higher. The light made the silver in Luma's eyes shine like glass. The wind blew gently. It felt peaceful. But under that peace was sadness. Heavy sadness. Finally, Luma walked to the escape pod and pulled something out, a small wooden carving. It looked like a flower. She held it out to Ethan. He took it carefully. "You made this?" She nodded. "Mama taught." He smiled, holding it like a gift. "Thank you." Then he noticed something else. Carvings lined the inside of the pod. Flowers, stars, a woman's face. All made with tiny hands. Signs of a life they were trying to hold on to. This wasn't just survival. It was memory, love, hope. Ethan stood and looked at the small shelter they had made from tree branches and cloth. It wouldn't last long. Not in rain, not in winter. He looked back at Luma. "Do you want a safer place?" he asked. She tilted her head. "A warm house. Real beds, food, clean water." She looked unsure. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. "Ha, promise." Luma didn't reply, but she didn't run either. And Ethan knew that was a start. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the girl's eyes. Luma, they were the eyes of someone who had seen too much pain, too young. That night, after returning home, Ethan sat on his porch with the small wooden flower she had given him. He turned it over in his hands, feeling every rough edge, every carved line. It wasn't just a toy. It was a memory. A cry for help without words. He had to know more. The next morning, he packed more food, clothes, and a small power tool. He didn't just want to feed the children anymore. He wanted to understand them. When he reached the forest clearing, Luma and Rena were waiting. This time, they didn't hide. Luma stood tall, still silent, while Rena peeked out from behind her leg. Ethan knelt and offered a warm blanket. Luma hesitated, then took it carefully and wrapped Rena inside it. She nodded at Ethan again. No words but trust was building. "I need to look inside the ship," Ethan said slowly, pointing at the old escape pod. "I want to fix something." Luma stepped aside and allowed him in. Inside the pod, the air was cold and musty. Broken lights lined the walls, and dust covered the floor. But it was more than a wreck. Ethan saw marks of a life once lived drawings scratched into the walls. Soft cloths rolled into makeshift beds, and in the center, a locked storage box. The box was sealed with alien tech. Ethan knelt beside it. He took out his multi-tool, switched to the fine blade, and carefully cut along the lock. The box clicked open with a soft hiss, and a small hologram crystal rolled into his hand. "What is this?" he whispered. Luma stepped behind him. She saw the crystal land froze. Her breathing changed. She reached for it, hands shaking. "You know this?" Ethan asked gently. She nodded, tears welled in her eyes. Ethan placed the crystal into the broken display port on the wall. It didn't fit perfectly, but after a few seconds of buzzing and blinking, the device powered on. A soft blue light filled the pod. A hologram appeared. It was a tall alien woman, graceful, strong, and tired. Her lavender skin was dull, her eyes weary. But her voice was soft, full of love. "To my children," the recording began. "If you see this, it means I didn't survive the crash. I'm so sorry." Luma fell to her knees. Rena, now holding her hand, watched the light with wide eyes. "I did all I could." The mother said, "I kept you alive this long. I tried to fix the ship, but my body is too weak. Someone finds you. If anyone sees this message, please, please help my children. They are kind. They are brave. They are all that is left of me." The hologram glitched for a moment, then continued. "Luma, take care of Rena, and remember what I told you. Not all humans are cruel. Some still carry good hearts. Trust them, but stay hidden. I love you." Then the image faded, and the pod fell silent again. Ethan didn't know what to say. He turned and saw Luma still on the floor, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. Not with fear, but with grief, pain too heavy for a child to carry. He knelt beside her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know." Luma didn't speak, but she didn't pull away. She just cried, holding Rena close as he stared blankly at the now dark corner. Where his mother's voice had lived for a few seconds, Ethan stepped outside the pod, letting them have their space. He looked at the sky, then at the trees, then at the garden back home, far beyond the forest. This is no place for kids, he whispered to himself. He turned back inside. When Luma finally stood, her eyes red. She looked at Ethan again, and for the first time, she spoke without fear. Can we come with you? Ethan blinked, then nodded slowly. Yes, you're safe now. Ethan walked slowly through the forest, holding little Rena in his arms. Luma walked beside him, silent, clutching the old wooden flower she had carved with her mother. Her eyes didn't blink much. She just stared at the path ahead, as if afraid this was all a dream. Behind them, the old escape pod was quiet again. Cold, empty. Just a shell. But now, they were walking toward something warm. Toward a home. Ethan's mind raced with questions. How would he take care of them? What if the neighbors saw them? Would the colony law allow him to shelter alien children without permission? But deep inside, he already knew. The answer? He didn't care. They were kids. They needed someone, and he was all they had. When they reached the fence of his garden, Luma stopped. Her eyes moved across the vegetables, the rows of plants, and the little house with smoke rising from the chimney. This is yours, she asked softly. Ethan nodded. Yes, it's not much. But it's safe. Luma hesitated. Safe. For us. He looked down at her, serious. Yes, I promise. She took one more step and walked inside. Inside the house, the warm smell of soup filled the air. Rena's nose twitched. Ethan smiled. Come on, let's get you both cleaned up first. He guided them to the bathroom. The children didn't understand everything at first, how the tap worked, how warm water came from nowhere. But as Ethan gently showed them, they began to smile. Luma scrubbed Rena's small hands with a washcloth while Ethan brought out clean towels. The boy giggled for the first time when the warm water hit his feet. That small sound made Ethan's heart twist in his chest. After the bath, he gave them soft clothes from his storage shirts that hung too long and socks that fell down. But they were warm. He placed bowls of soup on the table. Rena rushed to his, but Luma paused. She looked at Ethan carefully. You give, without price, she asked. No price, he said, gently. You're not slaves. You're not animals. You're kids. She looked confused, as if she'd never heard those words before. Rena had already spilled soup on the table. Ethan just laughed and wiped it up with a towel. You'll learn, he said with a grin. Later that evening, Luma sat by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, watching the flames dance. Rena was asleep on the couch, his little arms hugging a pillow. Ethan sat beside her. Sipping tea, she looked up at him. Why you help us? Ethan was quiet for a moment. I was angry at first, he said honestly. I thought someone was stealing from me. I thought I was being cheated. He looked at her. But then I saw your face. And Rena's. And I realized it wasn't stealing. You were surviving. Just trying to feed your family. She looked down. I did bad, she whispered. No, he said firmly. You did what you had to. To protect your brother. Luma stared at the fire. Mama said. Humans don't help aliens. She said run if you see one. Ethan sighed. Some humans are like that, but not all. He leaned forward. I'm not like that. She nodded slowly. Mama said. Some humans still have good hearts. She was right, he said softly. The room fell quiet. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. Inside, the fire warmed the walls. Then Luma looked at him again. Can we stay? Long time? Ethan smiled. As long as you want. Yes. Her lip trembled. Not from fear, but from something new. Hope that night, Ethan made a small bed in the corner with extra blankets. He placed Rena there and covered him gently. The boy didn't wake. Luma lay down beside her brother and held his hand, before closing her eyes. She whispered one more thing. "Thank you, Ethan." He turned off the light. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in the house. And, for the first time in their young lives, the alien children felt like they belonged. The next few days were peaceful. Ethan's small house, once quiet and lonely, was now filled with small voices and tiny footsteps. Rena laughed often, playing with wooden spoons and chasing butterflies in the garden. Luma helped Ethan water the tomatoes. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words were kind and careful. Each night, Ethan cooked warm food, and they ate together by the fireplace. Rena would fall asleep quickly, and Luma often sat by the window, looking at the stars and whispering her mother's name. Ethan didn't ask questions. He just gave them safety. But peace doesn't last forever. One afternoon, Ethan walked to the nearby town to buy supplies, more food, warm socks, and a small jacket for Rena. The town was small, with dusty roads and neighbors who watched everything. At the shop, the storekeeper, Mr. Callan, raised an eyebrow. "Buying a lot today, Ethan? More than usual." "Got guests," Ethan replied calmly. "Family?" Callan asked, voice sharp. "Sort of," Ethan said. Avoiding his eyes, he paid quickly and left. But whispers had already started. That night, as the sun went down, two men came walking down Ethan's path. They didn't knock. They shouted, "Ethan, we know someone's in there." Ethan stepped outside, blocking the doorway. His face was calm, but firm. Behind him, Luma peeked from the window. Rena was asleep inside, hugging a worn-out blanket. "What's the problem?" Ethan asked. One of the men stepped forward. It was Dean, a local farmer with a short temper and loud voice. "You hiding something? Someone?" Dean asked. "No," Ethan replied. "I'm protecting someone." Dean's eyes narrowed. "Aliens, aren't they? Saw small shapes in your window. This colony doesn't allow that." "They're just children," Ethan said, his voice low. "They've done nothing wrong. They're not human." The second man spat. "You think they're safe? What if they bring disease? Or worse, what if their kind comes looking for them?" "They've been alone in the forest since their ship crashed," Ethan said, stepping closer. "No one came for them. No one even noticed them. Except me." Dean scoffed. "This ain't your problem. Let the council handle it. They'll remove them clean and quiet." "No," Ethan said. Now standing tall, "They stay with me." Dean's face turned red. "You're a fool, Ethan. You'll regret this." The men turned and walked off into the dark. Luma stepped out slowly, holding her brother's hand. "Are they coming back?" she asked. Ethan didn't lie. "Maybe," he said. "But I won't let them take you." She looked up at him. "Even if it's dangerous?" "Even then," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He stood by the window, holding an old rifle, watching the road, just in case. The next day, he took action. He went to his old barn and fixed the door. He added extra locks to the house. He gathered supplies, bandages, medicine, tools. He taught Luma how to stay low, how to hide with Rena if anything happened. She listened carefully. She was smart and brave. 2 days passed. Then 3, no one came. But the whispers in town grew louder. Some said Ethan had lost his mind. Some said he was a traitor. Only a few remembered that he had once saved the mayor's son during a forest storm years ago. Still, no help came. Only silence. But inside Ethan's home, something beautiful was growing. Luma smiled more. She drew pictures with chalk on the wooden floor. Rena learned to say thank you and please, and Ethan. He laughed again. He remembered what it felt like to be needed, to be trusted, to be family. One evening, while they were all sitting By the fire, Luma looked up from her drawing and asked, "Ethan, are we a burden?" Ethan's heart ached. He knelt down and looked her in the eyes. "No," he said softly. "You are a blessing." She blinked. "What is blessing?" He smiled. "Something that makes life better." She looked at Rena, then back at Ethan. "You make life better too." The fire crackled softly outside. The wind whispered across the trees, inside. A human and two alien children sat close, sharing warmth, and building something stronger than blood. Family, a soft snow began to fall the next morning. Tiny white flakes danced through the air, covering Ethan's garden like a quiet blanket. The tomato vines had already withered from the cold, but Ethan didn't mind. His focus was no longer on vegetables. It was on them. Luma and Rena. Inside the house, the two children sat by the fire. Rena was trying to copy a drawing Luma had made. A picture of Ethan, smiling with a shovel in one hand and a tomato in the other. His head was too big in the drawing, and the smile was crooked. But Ethan had laughed when he saw it. It was perfect. That day, Ethan decided to do something special. He brought out a small tree from the shed. Not a big one, just enough to fit in the corner of the living room. He placed a few lights on it and small decorations from his old storage box. Rena gasped with joy when the lights blinked on. "What is this?" Luma asked, tilting her head. "It's something we do on Earth during winter," Ethan explained, smiling. "It's called a holiday tree. Means peace, hope, and family." Luma blinked. "We never had a tree." "You do now." She touched one of the lights gently and whispered, "It's beautiful." Ethan watched them play, then stepped outside to chop some wood. The air was cold, and his breath turned to mist. As he swung the axe, he noticed something in the distance. Shape on the road. A single figure. Coming closer, he narrowed his eyes. It was Mayor Tross, the leader of the colony. A tall man with a gray beard and serious eyes. He wore a long coat and gloves, his boots crunching in the snow. Ethan lowered the axe and walked to meet him. "Mayor," he said. Trass stopped. "Ethan, we need to talk, I figured." The mayor looked at the house behind him. "The rumors are true." "Yes," Ethan said calmly. "I've taken in 2 alien children, survivors from a crash. They were starving. Alone, I didn't have the heart to leave them." Trass didn't reply. "Right away, I saw the crash report years ago," he finally said. "No one investigated. It was just marked as debris. We thought nothing survived. They did." I see Ethan stepped forward. "I know what the law says. I know the risks. But I don't regret it. They've done nothing wrong." Mayor looked him in the eye. "And if the council asks questions? If they demand answers?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'll protect them." Trass looked down at the snow, then back at Ethan. "You saved my son once." Ethan pulled him from that flood in the canyon. "Hide." "Do it again." Trass nodded slowly. "Then I'll return the favor." Ethan blinked. "What do you mean?" "Oh. Mark your property as protected. Private land, off limits to inspections. You'll need to keep them hidden, at least for now, but they can stay." Relief washed over Ethan's face. "Thank you." Trass held up a finger. "One condition." Ethan tensed. "Teach them well. Teach them how to be kind, to be strong. If they grow up here, they'll need it." "I promise." The mayor gave a small smile, then turned and walked back into the falling snow. Ethan stood there for a while, watching the figure disappear into the white. Then he walked back into the house. Luma looked up. "Who was that?" "Just someone. Making sure we're okay." Ethan said. She nodded and went back to helping Rena hang a small drawing on the tree. That night, Ethan sat with the children by the fire. Rena fell asleep first, as always, curled up with a pillow too big for him. Luma stayed awake, sitting beside Ethan, watching the flames. "You gave us everything," she said softly. Ethan smiled. "You gave me something too." "What?" "A reason to live." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Are we family now?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan whispered, placing an arm around her. "You always were." Snow continued to fall outside, covering the old footprints, the broken path through the woods, and the crash site that had once been a grave. But inside that small, warm house, a new life had begun. Not stolen, not feared, but full of love. A true family formed in the unlikeliest of places.